against him. That's about it for the evidence against John Moxley. There's really not much there.
That is really paper thin.
It is. I think so.
Yeah, I mean, there's some other questions, right, as to, like, how did he get the golf club?
Well, I mean...
like we said, they left him laying about.
They were readily available.
Yeah, but he would have had to gone over to the other house and get it and then brought it back. It's not as though it would be laying about the Moxley property, right?
Yeah, maybe not. But the thing about this neighborhood, too, is that there really wasn't much in the way of fences in the neighborhood, and people all just sort of crossed each other's property all the time.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's much like, it drives me nuts. It makes me think of my neighborhood, which is not nearly as ritzy or large. But
understatement of the year.
Yes, but the kids in the neighborhood, they run through my front yard, and then they run across my neighbor's front yard, and then that neighbor's front yard, and then they veer onto the sidewalk, and then they veer across the street, and then they veer into somebody else's front yard. All of this at top speed.
Yeah, but how old are they?
12 to 15.
Okay, all right.
Where's your shotgun, dude?
Well, the problem is that I can't keep them off of my yard. I am not that old man. I have to physically restrain myself so that I don't go running out there saying, "Get off of my grass!"
Yeah.
But I mean, it happens. I watch this all the time, and I'm like, "Do you not understand?" And then I realize they don't. They don't get it, and I think that the same thing is that it's communal to them at that point. Oh, yeah, the Skankles, they left the golf club. I picked up the golf club. I carried it home. I'll wander back by in a couple of days and just chuck it on their lawn, and the gardener will pick it up.
Yeah.
That weirdo guy will do it.
I guess there's some... I can explain away why John might have gone the way he went, right?
Mm-hmm. Well,
to go out back. I mean, Martha's body was discovered by her friend who was cutting through her property, which means that, like, that's how those friends got to each other's property usually, right?
So it was probably a route.
Right. So one would assume that, but also one would assume that if you were going to go investigate that way, you would see the body. So,
depending on the light at the time that you're walking through. If he's wandering about 4 a.m, and it doesn't fall into his flashlight beam, he's not going to see it.
No, but it was my understanding that was the search with his male friend.
Yeah.
Was like 8 or 9.
It was about 9,
yeah.
And it was very brief. Basically, they just went out back and sort of took a look, and
yelled, probably.
I don't think they even yelled. They just sort of looked.
Interesting.
Yeah, but, again, I'm not going to try to accuse John Moxley. I've seen a couple of different interviews with him on the tube, and he seems like a reasonably decent, sincere guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't see any indications he's a psycho killer. Next up is Martha's boyfriend at the time, Peter Zaluka.
She had a boyfriend.
She had a boyfriend.
Okay.
Yeah. I think Peter was 16 at the time. He is since deceased. A lot of people involved with this case, by the way, died young for some reason. Usually of drug overdoses or just whatever, heart attacks. Martha's father is dead.
Living an indulgent lifestyle. Okay.
Yeah. Well, Martha's father was actually not indulgent. He was a workaholic. He's one of those guys that,
never stopped.
Type A personality. Who died in his 50s, I believe.
Oh,
maybe 60s. I don't know. But he died fairly young though. Unfortunately. Dorothy, to my knowledge, is still alive. Back to Peter Zaluka, the boyfriend. There were some diary entries in Martha's diary about Peter. Apparently that he had some really bad moods. He said hateful things to Martha. He had a reputation as a violent person, a fighter.
How old was he?
I think he was 16.
Okay, that explains that. Got it.
Yeah, I know.
16-year-old dudes, they're dumb. They say stupid stuff.
Yeah.
Got it? Okay.
Yeah. But apparently Martha, according to her diary at least, was planning to break up with Peter.
Which indicates nothing. Okay.
No. But Peter...
I understand it indicates that she may have done it that night and that he reacted badly, but...
Or perhaps, he has an alibi, which is his mother, which is not the tightest alibi I've ever heard.
Yeah, that's a pretty common one. Family member.
Yeah, it is, and not a tight one. But if you look at it, he apparently said that he worshipped Martha. He was apparently really gaga over Martha. Imagine a scenario where he went out. He didn't actually stay at home at all with his mother, because why would he stay at home with his mother? He stayed at home with his mother and watched TV. Imagine he went out for mischief night. Imagine he made his way over towards the Moxley house and was maybe crossing the Skakel's land, of which they had a fairly decent-sized parcel, and happened to see Martha and Tommy going at it.
Fooling around.
Yeah. Did I explain exactly how he changed his story? I'll tell
Tommy?
Yeah, Tommy.
No, you decided to break him up, so you haven't told us the second half of his story.
They had a sexual encounter. Yeah, well, they hung out.
Remember the hands pants?
Yeah, hands and pants
description. That's what he means by a sexual encounter.
Yeah, they essentially, according to Tommy, they engaged in a mutual masturbation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hands pants.
Yeah.
Hands pants.
Yeah, and supposing if he witnessed this, and if you're 16 and head over heels in love and something like that, you see that. I mean, obviously I could see where that would cause somebody to flip out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. I can see the violent rage. I can also see the sobbing, blubbering mess. I mean, that could go either way.
Yeah.
But it'd also be interesting if the dude in that scenario, the extra dude in that scenario, didn't bear some of the wrath.
Well, that's it.
You would think.
You would think that he would be going after Tommy even
first.
more. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Martha.
Yeah.
But maybe not.
Yeah, well, anyway, Peter Zaluka took a polygraph and passed, apparently. And I'm not so sure how ironclad polygraphs really are.
Yeah, they're not the best ever. But okay, so Peter's cleared, so that leaves us with 1.5 suspects.
Yeah, kind of. Well, Michael changed his story. And eventually, the Sutton investigation was closed down. Tommy had a lawyer ever since like 1976. He had early '76. He had a lawyer.
Not shocking.
Named Manny Margolis, and he was present when Tommy changed his story. That was in summer 1992, and that's when he shut down the Sutton investigation. But then there was somebody that Sutton had hired. They'd hired this guy.
That's right.
Yeah, and this guy was about 22, 23, and his job was to distill all the information in the files into a nice, coherent, well-written report.
Right.
And he is the guy who leaked the report to Dominic Dunn. I remember him. He used to write for Vanity Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. He leaked a copy of that report to Dominic Dunn because he felt that this report really implicated the Skakels, especially Michael. And of course, Dominic Dunn eventually gave the report to Mark Furman, who used as a basis for a lot of charges in his book. So we talked about how Michael changed his story when talking to.
And it was for the Sutton.
Yeah, but that was not the first time he had actually changed his story.
Okay,
right, which we talked about.
Yeah,
but it formed it formed the basis for the Furman book, which again was the blueprint for the prosecution case.
Okay.
The major difference between the prosecution and Furman's book is at least Furman was honest enough to acknowledge the golf club handle was present at the crime scene. I mean, he insinuated that there was corruption in the Greenwich Police Department and that perhaps a corrupt cop had gotten rid of the evidence, but he at least acknowledged that it was present at the crime scene.
Okay.
Which the prosecution didn't do. The prosecution said that the murderer, whoever he was, had carried it away with him from the crime scene. Michael Skakel also made statements to a guy named Richard Hoffman, who was a ghostwriter. He was going to write a book since he had come back under the microscope. He was going to write a book about
to exonerate himself.
Yeah, and tell the story and all that. And so they made a bunch of tapes. And in these tapes, he made some various statements, like he talked about the whole climbing of the tree thing. And he also talked about when he woke up the next day and Dorothy Moxley was standing outside his bedroom door. His statement was basically like, "Oh, Merd, what if she saw me last night?" And they played that, and the prosecution played that in closing arguments. And they played the tape, and they selectively edited and stuff, and they played the tape along with the picture of Martha's dead body laying in the yard.
In some kind of like PowerPoint
It was a PowerPoint thing, yeah. And apparently that was that was very effective. So that was part of their closing. Their evidence was basically the non-existent semen, which said that the prosecution actually stated he had purposely ejaculated on Martha's body as a final act of disrespect. And I read the closing. That's what he said, even though nothing was found on her body.
Man, Michael should have just stuck to the Shaggy defense. Wasn't me. No matter what they say, wasn't me.
But she saw me on the counter.
Wasn't me.
Yeah. Obviously.
Both going over.
Yeah.
Who's getting loud?
But anywho.
Yeah. All right. So much for that. But and there was a little more evidence. But obviously, the statement on the tape was taken by the jury to mean, what if she saw me murdering Martha?
Oh, no. That was as stitched together as some of our past episodes.
Oh, yeah.
Totally put together.
Oh, yeah. And, and obviously if she had seen Martha being murdered, I don't think she would have waited till 8:30 in the morning to come over and say, hey, Michael, I want to talk to you about you murdering my daughter.
Yeah. No.
But that seems to be the implication from that. I mean, that's totally the implication.
So dumb.
Yeah.
Okay. This guy is so going to be out of jail the decision's going to come through by the time this episode posts.
I hope so.
Maybe so. They've had
I am so, based on what we've talked about and I've read.
I hope he gets resolution soon.
Good Lord.
I hate to break it to you guys, but I got to tell you this. Judges are more concerned about process than they are, for the most part, about justice.
Yeah.
They are.
But the process was ruined because they said they had evidence, which that evidence has never been presented.
Well, exactly. They lost so much evidence, and to take the loss of the golf club handle and to make so much hay out of that, like, this points a finger at the defendant. You guys just lost it.
To say you have a piece of evidence but not make that available to the defense to then say, well, you didn't want to do any testing on it, but let me do testing to see if I can prove my client innocent. I mean, that's a process problem. This whole thing is just so foobar.
Yeah.
So
so that's Michael.
Yeah. The other evidence they had is they had testimony. Remember I said Elon, the school where for drug-addled kids and stuff like that? There were two guys that were at that school with him who testified at his trial. One of them was John Higgins. And John Higgins actually doesn't get very good character references. I've read a lot of trial court transcripts of various people that went to Elon with him and then had very low opinion of him and didn't feel he was honest or trustworthy. But the state of Connecticut's investigator, Frank Garr, was apparently contacted by somebody who knew Higgins and said that he should call Higgins. Because at this time, there was a $50,000 reward posted by the Moxley family.
Oh, crap.
Yeah, and so Higgins apparently contacted them, or maybe Garr contacted Higgins. And John Higgins basically said, look, I don't know. I know nothing because Michael never told me that he confessed to. He never told me he murdered Martha Moxley. And so then Frank Garr spells out to him very carefully. Do you know about the reward? This is a policeman again. Frank Garr says, do you know about the reward? And Higgins says, yeah, I hear it's $50,000. And at the time, the reward had just been raised to $100,000.
Okay.
And so Garr says to Higgins, well, it's $100,000. And Higgins says to him, oh, that's special. And then Garr
terms of it,
pretty much what he needs to tell him, and then calls him back at a later time and says, hey, have you thought about that? Thought about all this? And then Higgins changed his story.
And how do we know that, by the way? Is this on tape somewhere?
Yeah, Frank Garr taped the conversation.
So we hear him building the witness's story, and then having the witness...
And then he changes his story. He doesn't change his story. He doesn't change his story to Michael saying, I did it. He changed the story to Michael saying, yeah, it was all kind of in a haze. It was kind of like in a dream. I was in the garage pulling a golf club out of a set. And the next thing I know, I was running through some pine trees. He made it
into a dream scene in a TV show. Okay.
Yeah, I was running through some pine trees, with the golf club, and that's, all I remember. That was enough for the jury. But he never actually Higgins never actually said, Michael said, I did it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because he was willing to shade it in order to collect some money. But he was not willing, apparently, to go over the line and say that Michael had actually said, I did it. There was another witness, Greg Coleman. Also,
this is for or against Michael?
This was against Michael.
Okay.
Yeah. Similar kind of guy. He was a heroin addict, and heroin
not
addicts.
Reputable.
I don't want to sound judgmental, but they're not the most trustworthy people, But he said that Michael had confessed to him while at Elon. He said that he'd done it. And he changed the story up a little bit. At one time he said that Michael had confessed to him like 6 times, and then finally he winnowed it down to maybe 2 times. But, nobody else at Elon, everybody else that went to Elon with Michael said that if he had fessed up at Elon, it would have been all over the school. It was a small school, about 100 students, and they were all encouraged.
Anything at any school spreads like wildfire.
Yeah.
And, they were totally encouraged to rat each other out, too. And so, so for the other people, there were other people that testified for the defense that said this was completely laughable. This whole idea that this guy would have kept it to himself.
Yeah, no, he wouldn't.
Ridiculous. So the other thing about Michael is they interrogated them on the day of the body being discovered.
Right.
And they didn't give him all polygraphs, but I saw Michael's brother John, who was in the car that went to the Terrians and provided him with an alibi. I saw him on the tube. He seemed completely honest and sincere. And he said, look, I was with Michael, and that's what I told the police the day of. And I took a polygraph test, and I passed it, and that was good enough now. And now they're claiming that we're all liars. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was sincerely a little outraged by the whole thing.
Yeah, I'd be incensed, yeah.
Yeah, but I do think that Michael Skakel is innocent. I think his alibi is solid. One thing I forgot to mention is that Ken Littleton was routinely being picked up by the police, and in 1976 he told Greenwich police that Rushton Jr. told him at about 9:15 on the night of the 30th that he was going to take Jimmy Terrian back home and then the police withheld Yeah, and they withheld that from the defense along with some other tidbits.
So basically, Michael's innocent.
Apparently, yeah, because they could not have gotten a conviction without undermining his alibi the way they did. But his alibi, and they found there was one other witness that was not present at the trial who also confirmed his alibi that he was at the Terrians. So essentially, that's it. He's innocent. That doesn't mean that the Supreme Court is not going to toss him back in jail, because you don't know the way lawyers think. But anyway, sorry lawyers out there, by the way. Let me get on. So Michael's out. Let's get on to the next ones. These ones were put forth by, first of all, a guy named Tony Bryant. RFK Jr. talks about him in his book. Tony Bryant actually went to Greenwich, he claims, on the day of the murder. Tony is, by the way, is brother of Kobe Bryant, the basketball player.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you can see he was interviewed by detectives that were sent by Michael's defense team to interview him, and it's a two-part video. It's on YouTube. If you go and type in Tony Bryant interview, you'll find it. Have you seen it?
It's not ringing a bell.
Okay. So he talks about these two guys that he went to high school with. Tony used to actually go to school and live in Greenwich, but then he moved to New York City. And he was going to a much rougher high school, and he knew these two big dudes. They were like 16 years old, Adolph Hasbrook and Burton Tinsley. The three of them like to actually occasionally go out to Bellhaven and hang out, since Tony used to live out there. And apparently he says in his interview that Adolph became obsessed with Martha. He met her apparently a few times. And he believes that from things that he said, that Adolph and Burr said before and after the murder, he believes that they did it. I don't want to get into great detail. By the way, I do want to say, by the way, there's no corroborating evidence.
I was going to say that this is all there is for those two.
Yeah.
For him.
There is not much in the way of evidence. But apparently these guys did lawyer up, and they're not talking. And again, I'm not saying they're guilty of anything, because frankly, I really don't see much of a motive here. So let's move on to our last suspect, Tommy Skakel. Tommy, as we've noticed, had a history of violent outbursts. He changed his story. Like Michael, he changed his story. But here's the deal. Michael changed his story a lot sooner, before DNA was a thing. Tommy waited till after. There were a couple of Sutton investigators that sat him down for an interrogation in summer of 1992. One of them, Billy Krebs, I think he was ex-NYPD, said, "Look, Tommy, you gotta understand this. We're gonna be doing some DNA testing. And so, if there's anything that you haven't told us before, you should tell us now."
That's standard procedure to rattle somebody. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is when Tommy changed his story. And said that they spent an extra 20 minutes between 9:30 and 9:50 out back behind the tool shed in the yard, doing their whole, hands pants thing. And they were leaning on it pretty hard. Apparently, from what I understand is Tommy,
the investigators were?
They were after he changed his story. And apparently Tommy looked like he was about to cry. Then one of them just suggested that they take a break. Billy Krebs was infuriated by this, because it broke the whole tension thing, and also it allowed Manny Margolis, who was present, the lawyer, to basically put an end to the whole interview. Mm-hmm. So they never got any further with Tommy. But I gotta say, I mean, all the suspicion has been cast upon Michael because he changed his story because that would account for